The fate of the Tomahawks will be decided this week. Trump is ready for anything?
We are fully prepared for nuclear war with Russia.
And right on cue, Medvedev is on the line. A new round of nuclear threats has been directed at Trump.
He stated that supplying Tomahawks to Ukraine could end badly. And he's threatening not Kyiv, but Trump personally. Looks like the expert is having another rough morning after a heavy night.
One more resolved conflict in Gaza goes to Trump's personal record.
Trump actually ended the war, though it happened after he was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize, so there was really no need to try anymore.
A ceasefire was signed in Egypt, though it was done without the participation of the parties to the conflict.
The official ceremony was attended by the leaders of Egypt, Qatar, the US and Turkey. It was these countries that acted as mediators in resolving the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
Trump is once again risking his career and his marriage too.
In the US, if you call a woman beautiful, that's the end of your political career. But I'll take the risk. You don't mind being called beautiful, do you? Because that's exactly what you are.
But not a single one is cute. Trump confessed his love for the fantastic Lyuba of Putin.
We have Hungary. Oh, Viktor. Where's Viktor? Viktor, we love Viktor. You're just fantastic, you know that. I know that many people don't agree with me.
Priorities have been set. Orbán bows, but not to Putin, to Aliyev. And finally, in Russia, they're talking about the main achievement, the special military operation.
Our youth has been killed. Now the savages are solving this problem through factory food supplies, and among the cultured, it's the youth. Then in Central Asia, then it will be in Kazakhstan, the conversations going on in the region, and so on.
Beauty will save the world, but that's definitely not the promise of the so-called DNR. Get ready! Alright, let's start with school. By the way, the anthem is on me. That is, this has already loosened the ties. The Russian anthem is on me. Get ready.
Vladimir Fisenko is joining our broadcast. We will discuss with him Vladimir Zelensky's visit to meet with Donald Trump. Vladimir, hello.
Good evening.
We're glad to see you. Please, could you share your expectations for this meeting? What is very important for the Ukrainian side to declare or obtain? With what result is it important for Zelensky to return?
In fact, I actually think we are really not talking about just a single result at all. And there won't be just one topic, but several, all of them very important. The visit itself, specifically Zelensky's visit, I actually think wasn't planned for these dates. Everything happened quite spontaneously. The visit that was being prepared and is now taking place is the visit of our large government delegation. For example, Minister Yulia Sviridenko is there, as well as the head of the President's office, Andriy Yermak, and the Secretary of the National Security and Defense Council, Umerov. The main topic is weapons, including long-range weapons and air defense systems. There should also be discussion about cooperation in the energy sector, most likely about gas purchases, and cooperation in the modernization and restoration of our energy infrastructure in connection with Russian strikes. But after President Trump achieved significant and undeniable success in the crucial gas sector, this is, of course, perhaps his single biggest diplomatic triumph during his potential second presidency. He is truly inspired, he is profoundly uplifted, and he now genuinely wants new diplomatic, and I would even say peacekeeping achievements and lasting accomplishments. And since the matter of principle that remains unresolved is the war between Russia and Ukraine, it is necessary finally to put an end to it. This is a conflict that worries Trump and one he has promised to end. He decided to speed up this process since there had been a stalemate, and in recent weeks he was occupied with the gas sector and some other issues. Therefore, apparently, it was precisely the acceleration of the peace process on the Ukrainian front that prompted Trump, first of all, to speak with Zelensky by phone twice in 2 consecutive days, something that has never happened before, not under any other US or Ukrainian president. There's never been anything like this, 2 days in a row of phone conversations between the US and Ukrainian presidents. And so an urgent idea arose, as we were told today, not all issues can be discussed over the phone. Zelensky has been invited for another visit to the United States. I should note that this is already the 6th meeting between the presidents of the US and Ukraine in less than 9 months of Trump's presidency. And for the 3rd time during the same period, it's taking place at the White House. Yet another record. Nothing like this has ever happened before. In general, the intensity of contacts and negotiations, some official, some semi-official on various platforms, like recently at the UN General Assembly, or earlier at the NATO summit, or there was a meeting during the Pope's funeral. It doesn't matter where or how. The main thing is that this is active diplomatic work. And we can see that the situation in the relationship between the presidents of the US and Ukraine, compared to what it was at the beginning of Trump's presidency, his second term, has changed significantly, and it has changed for the better. This is thanks to the work of President Zelensky and our diplomacy. The upcoming meeting scheduled at the White House will most likely address not only the topics I've already mentioned, which our delegation in the US is working on. There's even a new term that's appeared. Ukraine Week in the US, since negotiations will be taking place all week, culminating, of course, in the meeting between the two presidents on Friday. But the main topic will most likely be the prospects for resuming, or more precisely, actually starting real peace negotiations to end the war between Russia and Ukraine. However, there are problems. The problem is already a traditional one and the most difficult. How ready is Russia for this? There are serious doubts about that. Accordingly, pressure needs to be put on Russia. Trump has already started doing this with the Tomahawk issue. And if Russia does not give any signals about resuming real peace negotiations, I think that if not this week, then perhaps a bit later, but we should expect decisions regarding long-range weapons. It doesn't necessarily have to be Tomahawks right away, although who knows. Some outlets are already reporting that even the number of Tomahawks that could be provided to Ukraine is being discussed. But again, these are signals to Russia. Either you return to the negotiating table and are genuinely ready to agree on ending the war, or Ukraine may receive Tomahawks. So Trump is taking a rather determined stance. His peacemaking efforts have now received a powerful positive boost. We'll see how events develop further. They will unfold not only on the Ukrainian front. Judging by the remarks and based on some of Trump's statements, he is also preparing for active negotiations with Russia. Witkova might be sent to Moscow, or there could be a phone conversation between Putin and Trump. Therefore, we will see two parallel tracks. One with Ukraine involving the Americans and Trump personally, and another with the Russians. Well, from there, everything depends on how successful they are in reaching some kind of compromise solutions. What Russia is proposing are negotiations based on agreements, in quotes, in Anchorage. Why in quotes? Because there were no actual agreements made there. And Russia, just like it did during the negotiations in Istanbul, is trying to present the discussion of specific topics as if they are actual agreements. So that's the Russian style, to twist everything, to present things as their own wishes. But I think this scenario won't work. They'll have to look for compromises, and it's possible that, as was the case with the Gaza Strip, the American side will present its own compromise solution. We'll see. I think we are in for an intensification of the negotiation process, but we shouldn't expect quick results, since Russia will clearly try to push through a completely different scenario.
I want to ask you about the threats. Overall, did they have any effect or not on the opinion of the American president? Because we remember there was a whole avalanche of them, from Putin to Medvedev. Everyone expressed their opinion about what would happen if those attack missiles are sent to Ukraine. Then today Medvedev said that, well, yesterday he said that it wouldn't end well for everyone, and especially for Trump, if those attack missiles are sent to Ukraine. Tell me, please, is Trump actually afraid of these threats? But just objectively, what do you think?
Well, I think that, in fact, it's Medvedev who should be afraid. It's still unclear how all this will end. Of course, he was given the go-ahead to bark at Trump, but he's already on Trump's blacklist. Trump, of course, is a peculiar person. He doesn't let things go, as his history and his relationship with Musk show. However, it's clear that Medvedev is already on the blacklist, not just with Trump, but I think with the entire White House. Even J.D. Vance once spoke out about Medvedev. He clearly irritates them, but that's exactly how he's being used, as an irritant. It seems to me that right now the Russians, and by the way, some Western publications are writing about this, are using a rather peculiar tactic toward Trump known as good cop, bad cop. Well, Trump isn't exactly being interrogated, of course, but still, they're working with him using a complementary approach, a line of flattery and ingratiation. And even Putin himself is personally involved in this. Take Putin's speech at the Valdai Forum, for example. There was a clear effort to create a positive impression, not just for Trump, but even for his supporters, for the MAGA community. And then there's Medvedev and to some extent Lavrov, who play the role of the bad cops, talking about red lines and coming up with all sorts of scare tactics. I don't think this makes any impression on Trump, even when they're acting like evil clowns. I wouldn't call Medvedev a bad cop or a tough negotiator, because he doesn't actually take part in real negotiations. I'd call him an evil clown because no one takes him seriously. Here's an example. Russian publications, they wrote, citing sources close to Medvedev, that Dmitry Medvedev, former president of the Russian Federation and deputy secretary of the Russian Security Council, recently returned from North Korea.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
He had a brief meeting there with Kim Jong-un, and Medvedev came back once again angry. Well, maybe he didn't like the drinks there, but most likely it was something else. He told his inner circle that he was treated with disrespect. Kim Jong-un spoke with him for 15 minutes, didn't discuss anything serious, and there were just some meaningless formal meetings. In other words, he went there like a tourist. Even in North Korea, he isn't taken seriously. Accordingly, all Medvedev can do is vent his anger, his aggression, and he does this towards Trump. Apparently, he got the highest level permission for it. But it reminds me of Krylov's fable. Ah, little dog, you must be strong if you bark at an elephant. So Medvedev barking at Trump is just the Russian little dog. This is a very accurate illustration of the current situation. It doesn't make any impression on Trump. When other high-ranking Russian officials tried to set conditions for Trump, drawing red lines, saying, for example, that if, God forbid, the US gives Ukraine Tomahawks, then all negotiations between the US and Russia will stop, and it will be a crisis in bilateral relations. And after that, on the eve of Putin's birthday, no less, Trump said that he had almost made a decision regarding the Tomahawks. True, he said it in his own style, but added that he would still look at what targets and so on. It was obvious that he wasn't backing down, he didn't meet the Russian demands, and he didn't refuse to use the Tomahawk issue in relation to Ukraine. After that, people in Russia started talking again about the need for negotiations. But Russians have their own pride. Russia will stick to the principles of anchorage. But what exactly are these principles? What agreements were made? What did they agree on in Anchorage? For some reason, we in Russia are not being told. Some kind of new pact, I don't even know. There was the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. And now, I don't know, maybe it's the Dmitriev-Witkoff Pact or something else they've agreed on. It's unclear. Nevertheless, in Russia, they put on this stern, meaningful face while playing a losing game. Because I think they themselves don't understand what to do right now. They need to negotiate with Trump. They need to save the situation with Trump. Because Putin really wants to maintain a line of communication with Trump, but he doesn't want to make concessions either. So now they're in an ambiguous position. One way or another, right now it's Trump who's running the game. No matter how we feel about him, no matter how much many people criticize him, for now, he is only putting rhetorical pressure on Russia. He will bring them back to the negotiating table. Another thing is, as I already said, we shouldn't expect quick results. The Russians, after all, are rather cunning players too, and they don't want to lose. It's not working out for them on the front lines, but I think they want to, or rather will try to regain manipulative influence over Trump. Putin has managed to do this several times, partly even in Alaska. Now I think they might make a new attempt. But Trump doesn't just want pleasant conversations with Putin like before. He wants concrete results, just like what happened in the Gaza Strip. He wants a new peacekeeping victory. That's why the Russians will have to offer Trump something. So we're in for a new peacekeeping intrigue, but it will develop slowly. Although, by the way, negotiations in the Gaza Strip also lasted for half a year. And the first stages weren't very successful. They only reached an agreement now, not on the first try. That's why Trump apparently understands that even with Russia, it might not work out on the first try either. But that's okay, God willing, he'll succeed. The main thing is for him to be consistent, to keep up and increase the pressure on Russia and not play at making concessions like what happened in Alaska.
Well, it's also important to note that Trump always tries to share responsibility with other countries and leaders for ending the war in Ukraine. Once again, he mentioned Erdoğan, saying he could help regulate the war in Ukraine because supposedly Putin respects him. Why does Putin respect him? Is it because they shot down a Russian fighter jet 10 years ago, or what? And what do you think? Is it really... Yes, and what do you think if we assess it objectively, how much of this is just shifting responsibility and how much real influence does Erdoğan actually have in this process?
No, the theory about shifting responsibility was very popular, especially when Zelensky met with Trump. Trump wrote a very sensational post saying that Ukraine could regain its occupied territories, and this caused a huge stir. One of the theories, which first appeared in Moscow and was later echoed by some European politicians and commentators, is that supposedly the real issue is something else entirely, that Trump wants to shift responsibility onto the Europeans, as if to say, let the Europeans deal with Ukraine, I'm washing my hands of it. But as we can see now, Trump isn't stepping away from the game. He's still involved in the Ukrainian issue. And there's also the meeting with Zelensky. The use of the Tomahawk issue definitely doesn't mean that Trump is shifting responsibility onto someone else. No, he's playing himself, but Trump periodically changes his tactics, or more precisely, updates them. And in the case of Erdogan, I think this is a direct result of negotiations over the Gaza Strip. Let me remind you that there was a very peculiar negotiation set up there. The Americans were working with Israel. They were putting pressure on Israel to get it to agree to certain compromises. At the same time, Arab countries and also Turkey were involved in communicating with Hamas and putting pressure on them. Turkey, as another influential player in the Muslim world, but in the Arab world, the key mediators here were Qatar and Egypt. Egypt, for example, was the host of the peace summit in Sharm el-Sheikh. And this combination worked. Erdogan demonstrated his effectiveness as a mediator. And I think Trump appreciated that. Qatar once helped us in our communications with Russia regarding the return of both prisoners of war and in negotiations for the return of children. And Turkey is now participating as a mediator in the negotiations, which are currently suspended in Istanbul, but Turkey has repeatedly played this role quite successfully. Let me remind you, even the grain agreement, though temporary, Turkey, together with the UN, played the role of mediator there. The return of prisoners of war, the first major exchanges took place with Turkey's involvement. And now I think it is abundantly clear that Trump also keenly observes and fully comprehends the intricate geopolitical situation at hand. He deeply understands that in the current complex global landscape, President Erdoğan is quite possibly the singular statesman who genuinely possesses and maintains exceptionally good, strong, and effective personal relations with the leaders of the various warring countries involved in ongoing conflicts, making him a uniquely positioned and influential figure in international diplomacy. With both Putin and Zelensky, and Turkey is a strategic partner for both Russia and Ukraine. In this regard, Turkey's status is unique. And the choice of Turkey as a potential mediator is also quite logical. But this does not mean that Trump is shifting responsibility onto Erdogan. Rather, it's something else here. I think that, as was the case, by the way, during the negotiations on the Gaza Strip, Trump himself did not conduct the negotiations. He delegated this, first of all, to his aides. These were people very close to him, Steve Witkoff, and also Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner. And Erdogan, Turkish diplomats, as well as diplomats from Qatar and Egypt, helped with this. Trump was more of an impetus. He set the framework. This is the so-called Trump peace plan. By the way, I allow for the possibility, of course it's not certain, but it's quite likely that there could be a peace plan regarding Ukraine and Russia for the Russian-Ukrainian war, and a peace plan coming from the United States. But for that, he needs active negotiators on the ground. On the American side, it could be the same. Keith Kellogg will work with Kyiv, while Erdogan and his foreign ministers will work between Moscow and Kyiv. Something like this could happen. So it's not about shifting responsibility, but rather about using Erdogan as an experienced politician who has a special relationship with both Russia and Ukraine.
Vladimir, thank you for your analysis. Volodymyr Fesenko, political analyst, was on the air of Ukraine today. All the best to you. Goodbye.
Thank you. All the best. Goodbye.